Hi again, everybody. Welcome to the Bricks and Bleachers podcast. All things Chicago Cubs in under 10 minutes. Cubs are pretty much the hottest team in Major League Baseball right now. This weekend, they meet up with one of the other hottest teams in the league. We'll talk Cubs and Brewers in just a moment. And let's talk about the resurgence of Willson Contreras. And the Cubs keep winning in walk-off style. Got the latest on Cubs injuries, too. Cubs are 23-14, one-game lead in the National League Central. Cubs have been red hot. They were rained out 4 weeks ago, a Sunday against the Angels. Since then, they have won 18 of 23. They have not lost a series since the opening weekend of April in Milwaukee. Pitching has become the best in the league over the last month. Rotation fairly steady. At least for the four starters not named Yu Darvish, John Lester and Cole Hamels been pretty consistent. Kyle Hendricks started the year pretty shaky, but he has had back-to-back gems, including a complete game with just 81 pitches. And Jose Quintana leading the way with 4 wins for the Cubs. Yu Darvish has shown signs of the potential that led the Cubs to give him such a big contract. However, control seems to be a big issue. 8 starts, 6 of them he has dealt 4 or more walks. He's only stretched beyond 4 innings in half of his starts, and he's finished 6 innings just 1 time. We saw Mike Montgomery step up in long relief of Darvish in his last start, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's something we see on a regular basis if Darvish does not seem to improve. Let's reset the roster. I mentioned Mike Montgomery. He is just back from injury, and he looked great in relief of Darvish a couple days ago. Brandon Morrow has suffered a setback in his recovery. One report mentioned it may be the All-Star break by the time we see Brandon Morrow in a Cubs uniform ready to go. Long road remains ahead for him. Xavier Cedeno has joined the Cubs just the last couple of days. Cubs now have 3 lefties in the pen. Probably see Cedeno and Kyle Ryan in late innings with Mike Montgomery available in long relief situations. Addison Russell is a lightning rod. The team has remained behind him despite his personal situation. He ended up getting called up about a week earlier than planned from Iowa due to another personal situation, this one involving Ben Zobrist. He requested and was granted a leave of absence earlier this week, so Addison Russell had a spot to take on the roster. No official word as to what is up with Zobrist or when he may return. Now, I said previously Javi Baez would start and end the season at short. He has been incredible there so far. And at least for now, Addison Russell has a pretty secure spot on the roster playing second. When Zobrist is ready to return, it will be interesting to see who gets bumped off the roster. I wouldn't be surprised if it's Russell going back to Iowa because Daniel Descalzo has been playing pretty well. David Bodie, too. Chris Bryant, a slow start. He's started to show some signs of life last couple of weeks. He's been mixing it up between third and outfield. Taylor Davis with some play behind the plate, especially during starts of Yu Darvish. They have a great chemistry going on, and he's been getting time in place of Victor Caratini, who just moved up to Iowa this weekend, and Caratini likely returning to Chicago pretty soon. So a quick look around the National League Central. Cubs sitting atop the Central with a 1-game lead over the Brewers. The rubber match of a 3-game set at Wrigley is happening tonight. More on that shortly. Cardinals are a couple of games back of Milwaukee. Pittsburgh and Cincinnati both a little further back in the division, but each are within a couple of games of 500. Cubs have tomorrow, Monday, off before 3 in Cincinnati, followed by 3 in Washington. Reds pitching putting up some impressive numbers so far this year, but the offense has been quite weak coming into this season. I thought it was going to be the other way around. I thought the pitching was going to be lagging behind pretty solid offense. So be interesting to see how the Reds fare when the Cubs come to town this week. And the Nationals are off to an insanely slow start. Cubs with a ton of off days so far this season. I believe they are leading the major leagues in a number of days off so far. And now it's going to go the other direction. Now they're entering into a tough stretch. Only 2 off days between now and June 16. One of those off days happening tomorrow, May 13, and another coming May 30th. That's followed up by the whole month of June that features just 1 off day there. Cubs roster depth is going to be put to the test. Mentioned in a previous episode of the Bricks and Bleachers podcast, Cubs have an abundance of bullpen options. With injuries and that tough start, those first 10 days of the season, a lot of folks were saying, man, this team needs more arms in the bullpen. That's not the case. Cubs are very well stocked, and that will serve them well in the weeks ahead. Probably see quite a few moves of guys moving between Iowa and Chicago as Joe Madden will try to keep things fresh, especially if they keep needing extra innings. 15 innings yesterday and 3 walk-offs in the last 5 games for the Cubs. It's exciting, but that certainly depletes the bullpen for sure. And Pedro Strop is currently injured too. Some question his use as a closer anyway, but with his absence, Cubs definitely do not have a set closer ready to go. I think the road trip next week will be a big test. Last few days have not been safe situations, so the closer absence hasn't really been felt. One exception to that is one of those games with the Marlins earlier this week. I think having a solid closer probably would have helped secure that one. Tonight, it's the Cubs and Brewers. Sunday night baseball for Mother's Day. It's the second of 3 straight Sunday night appearances for the Cubs. Milwaukee took Friday's contest 7-0. Cubs came back with a 2-1 win yesterday, but it took 15 innings. John Lester and Julius Chassin, the starters tonight. Lester with only 1 run given up in 18 innings since returning from his hamstring injury a couple of weeks ago. And Willson Contreras with that walk-off homer yesterday, his 10th home run of the year. It took him more than 3 times the at-bats to hit 10 home runs last year. So he is far ahead of last year's pace. Great to see his resurgence. And one more last-minute note for tonight. Anthony Rizzo not in the starting lineup due to back tightness. He says it's normal. The Cubs playing a lot of games in the cold recently, plus the 15-inning marathon yesterday. Not a concern. In fact, we've been following the Cubs very closely. You know, especially early on in the year, Rizzo takes a day or 2 off because of back tightness. So we've seen this time and time again. They say this is pretty typical. So it's the Brewers trying to wrap up the series tonight and move into a tie for the division lead, while the Cubs hope to continue to maintain their streak of no series losses dating back to that series in Milwaukee the first weekend of April. Should be a good one tonight. Sunday night baseball on ESPN. Cubs off tomorrow before a 3-game set in Cincinnati against the Reds, and then 3 against the Nationals. Follow along with us, Bricks Bleachers, on Facebook and Twitter. We'd love to get your follows and comments too. All things Cubs in under 10 minutes. This is the Bricks and Bleachers Podcast.